Hi, this is the fourth video of a philosophy/politics series I'm putting out on YouTube, and this is the second video I'm filming today. That's why I'm wearing the same shirt. I promise it doesn't smell. And in this video I'm going to be talking about my theory of time and my theory of progress. Now, these theories are based upon Simone de Beauvoir, who said that attendance, what we do in daily life in modern society, says so much about our personality and our character, and how that links to the development of our general society. Now, she didn't do the Kantian thing of dwelling into it and labeling things as the terms that she came up with. Instead, I'm going to do that, and you have to listen. Okay, so I argue that there are three essential qualities of action. An action is either facilitated, an action is either passive, or an action is either active. Right, so think about this. Facilitated action is intermediary. What this means is that you and the end product of your action is divided. There is no link between you two. Instead, there is a third party that pulls you through, intermediary. Passive action argues that there is a line between the end product and you and your action, but it's initiated passively. This is going to make sense when everything is put together, by the way. An active action is when there is an active link between the end product and you as an individual and your actions. So, I also argue, on top of this, that there are natural qualities of action. So these were the essential qualities and these are the natural qualities. So an action is either constructive, which means an action can construct time. It's either consumptive, it can consume time that has been previously constructed, or it can deconstruct time, which is this is what Zizek calls the study of ideology. Right? When you try to deconstruct the biases of a society, that means you're deconstructing time, you're deconstructing the reality which frames itself as objective. And you you turn around and say, no, you're not objective, you're subjective. Now, that links back to the another video that I did. You can watch it if you want to. It's about epistemology and idealism. Okay. Now, these give us, we can create a matrix with these two types of categories and three subcategories in between them to give us a 9-point graph that help us frame. I drew it here, but it looks horrible. It's this one. I'm gonna show you another example. This here. Okay. It's a bit more squarey here. It's easy to look at. So, at the top, we have facilitated consumption, and then we have passive consumption, facilitated construction, facilitated destruction, passive construction, active consumption, and the list goes on. You just do a matrix with these. And the arrow here indicates low consciousness and high consciousness. So, let's use this typology to apply to real-world examples. At the top, we have facilitated consumption. What is an activity that you do that is facilitated and it consumes time? Well, a perfect example of this are TikTok videos, where you engage with the content in a facilitated manner. So the idea is that if it's a content that you engage with and you don't actively create ideas upon it, you're consuming it. You're consuming the time that was created by someone else. Why it's facilitated is because you don't give active understanding of it in trying to deconstruct it and understand say, the funny joke that goes on, because the product itself is self-explanatory. A perfect example of this are the TikTok videos where there's a guy explaining what is going on in the video that goes on above him in exact details. So he says, oh, there's a balloon. The balloon is popped. There's blue matter that comes out of the balloon. This is very funny because the parents were expecting a girl. Now, the explanation of the joke that goes on completely deprives you from the end product, which would have been humor. The end product would have been humor, but you're deprived from it. Instead, the guy facilitates you in that connection, and you're not linked to that end product anymore. And it's not you who laughs, it's the guy who laughs. Let's talk about another example. Passive construction. What is something that you do passively without applying your thought into it that constructs time? Well, any type of work, any type of 9-to-5 job is passive construction. You construct time that you get afterwards in different ends, and that could be money. That could be smelling good after doing laundry. You construct time, you get ends to it. However, you don't use your active skills of thought in carrying out the action. Instead, you do it passively without putting thought into it. Laundry is a good example of this. Let's find another one. Active construction. Now, this is interesting. Active construction is when you construct time for you and for general society by actively putting your critical thinking into it. This could be writing a book. You write a book which produces time in the abstract sense, and you do it actively because you have to think. You cannot just passively write a book. You have to think critically. Well, I guess you can, but it wouldn't be a good book anyway. You have to think critically for writing a good book in order to write a good book. Right. And as you see here, at the end, we have active destruction, or I framed it different here, active deconstruction. Well, destruction, that's not destruction, it's destruction. It's like we said, is when we dismantle the status quo, is when we dismantle our understanding of reality. And that destroys time. It doesn't consume it, it doesn't produce it, but it destroys time. And if you do it actively, that's the highest level of consciousness you can ever reach to. And active destruction is basically postmodern philosophy that operates even beyond the assumptions of the postmodern philosophy. So in a way, it's pure cynicism and skepticalism that attacks reality constantly. That's active destruction. My thesis is that the status quo is in continuous placement to pull us upwards in this matrix. They want us, the people in charge, want us not to think actively and not to do deconstruction and increase our consciousness. No, the ones in charge of the status quo want the status quo to be maintained. That's why they decrease our level of consciousness by reducing us towards the upper side of this square. It makes sense, right? They're confronted and Adorno speaks about this very explicitly. In fact, all critical theory is about this, but they don't have a matrix-style understanding of it. I do. The main idea is that we are continuously confronted with choices that we can make where we are thrown into this idle stage, which itself is action, because everything that goes on within the frame of time is action, but it's not constructive action, it's not destructive action, it's the action that reduces our level of consciousness, which pulls us towards obeying the status quo, because an unaware citizen is a good citizen, in that it doesn't try to dismantle the reality constructed by the government. Okay, that's the first part of the philosophy, which is here. And there's another part, and that is the integration of Hegelian understanding of the movement of the zeitgeist into this framework. So it says here that the context and the content. These are the examples I use to refer to reality. The context is the historical background that gives birth to the content and hosts the interaction. Now, this is all about the current status quo, right? And the content is subject at value that interacts with the context. Now, understand the ultra vagueness of these two terms, right? They can be applied in almost everything, in every situation. Hence, they're easy to apply. That's why they're universal somewhat. And how reality progresses is that context wherein which interaction takes place and content interact with one another to give birth to the context and the new content. The new content is the first step of the social change. And when the new context and the original context and the new content interact once again, it gives birth to the new context and the new content. And this argues that complete social change takes two steps. First, where the old content is the new context, and there's a new content. And second, where old content is completely gone, and there is both a new context and a new content. This switches down the Hegelian understanding of things, where things move unanimously. No, I argue that things move in bulks, in chunks. There is no smooth transaction. Well, there is, but the transaction is not continuous. We can put clear lines in between the historical process and label it as a stage where it's either one of these three typologies. And similar to the Hegelian understanding of things, I turn back. The new context and the new content becomes the content and the context in the end. And through that, development continues. And how this all ties together is the idea that we need a constant change of the content as opposed to the context. Changing the context should not be the primary ambition of society. Why? Because it's risky. And this kind of goes against the Marxist phrase, the idea that, a philosopher thinks, but it is up to the people to act for it. No, I think every single person in today's society has to be a philosopher now before we start acting, because essentially the more we rethink the content in which is going to become the context, the more perfect it becomes before application. So in this case, in the typology I set out here, change is not given the priority. Consciousness is given the priority. Making protests for any part of the world without thinking about it is essentially facilitated destruction. And often you find these with people who protest. They don't have to think about what they are going for, what they're passionate about, in order to be passionate about it, right? Hence, in the consciousness level, they're clearly above, in the negative sense of the word, the active destruction. Hence, this is why I frame philosophy is far more resourceful in opting for change, far more effective and far more positive in leading to change of the context than protest. Because without a resourceful content, change of the context will lead to another unresourceful context, wherein which not this social group perhaps that's in charge, but another social group will have the privilege in society, and inequality will persist.